for you this morning. I have a question for you. But first, let me ask you this. Most of you have known me for like 4.5 years now, some for 56 years, some not quite that long. Let me ask you, do you trust me? You do trust me? That's good to know. Do you trust me to put a blindfold on you and walk you down this aisle?
Yes.
Yes. Very good. Hang on a minute. Just want to shake things up this morning. I've created this obstacle course here. Hope it looks slightly dangerous to you. And now, let me ask you again. Would you trust me if I put a blindfold on you? Would you trust me to carefully guide you through this obstacle course? Yes. Can I get a volunteer? Oh, BJ, raise her hand right away. Okay, BJ, I'm going to give you this blindfold. But before you put it on, hold it right there. Just stand right there. Before I lead you through this obstacle course with your eyes covered, okay, you ready? How many of you would trust me now? Kind of changes things, doesn't it? BJ, I'm not really going to lead you. You can sit down, sweetheart.
No, I can do it.
That's okay. I just wanted to prove a point.
It's okay, I can do it.
That's okay. You can sit. I just wanted to prove a point. Did I prove it?
Oh, you need a
Completely
spackle.
changes things if I'm not able to see.
Do you need a spackle? Can I have
You
it?
can have it. How can I lead you if I myself cannot see, right?
Yes.
So last week we looked at the story from John chapter 9 about Jesus giving sight to a man who was born blind. And I'm going to be returning to this story again and again for the next few Sundays because I want to explore the theme that it carries, this theme of spiritual vision. And as you heard last week and as Danny read for you again this morning, the story begins when Jesus sees a man who cannot see. And Jesus opens his eyes to reveal the glory of God. In order to help this blind man see, Jesus covered his eyes, remember? Covered his eyes with some mud that he made out of dirt in his own spittle. And then Jesus, the one who was sent by God to help the world see God, Jesus sent the man who couldn't see to wash his eyes in a pool called Siloam, which means sent. So the man went to the pool called sent by the one who was sent by God, and he washed the mud off of his eyes. And his eyes were opened so that he could see God. Because after all, Jesus was sent into the world to shine a light on God's word so that the world could see God. Well, after the man could see, his neighbors weren't sure if they knew him. They weren't sure if he was the beggar they used to see who couldn't see. But the man said, yes, I am. I am that beggar that you used to see who couldn't see. And then he explained to his neighbors that a man called Jesus muddied his eyes and sent him to wash in a pool, and he went and he washed and he could see. And that's where we left off last week. But Danny just read a little more of the story for us this morning. He read about the man's neighbors leading him to the Pharisees. They led the man who had been born blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus made the mud and smeared it on the man's eyes on a Sabbath day. So the Pharisees asked him how he was able to see. And the man told them, he put mud on my eyes, I washed, and now I see. Some Pharisees said, this man Jesus isn't from God because he breaks the Sabbath laws. Others said, how can a sinner do miraculous signs like these? So they were divided. Now, I know that there is a whole lot to say about this text. I know there is a whole lot of really smart, theologically astute things to say here. But I just have one simple thing on my mind. This week, I've been reading this text over and over again. I've been doing Lectio Divina with it. You know what that is? That's when you read the text very slowly and you let it sink in and you let specific things be pulled out and drawn to you. So I've been doing that day after day with this particular text. And there is one verse that kept jumping out at me like someone was shining a light on it, or like someone had taken a highlighter and highlighted it for me. It was verse 13. Verse 13, it says this. Then that's the man's neighbors, right? Then the man's neighbors led the man who had been born blind to the Pharisees. The neighbors led this man who couldn't see, but who can now see. They led him to the Pharisees. That's how the text reads in the Common English Bible, which is what I've been using this week. They led him to the Pharisees. The Pew Bible, if you're looking at a Pew Bible this morning, it says they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. The point is that this man who could not see, but who can now see, he was taken, he was brought, he was led by his neighbors in the way and to the place that his neighbors wanted him to go. It seems to me, not exactly 100% sure about this, but it seems to me that the neighbors took this man to the Pharisees for some clarity. I think they wanted the Pharisees to kind of explain to them how this blind man could see. Now, I did try to research that so I could tell you for sure what somebody really smart had to say about it. But I wanted to know why the Pharisees needed to be involved in this situation and why the neighbors felt so compelled to lead the man there. But the only thing that I could find, the only information that I could glean about it was that the Pharisees were really bad guys. And that's really not true. That's not at all true. And I think that it reroutes us and misses the point of the story. The man's neighbors wanted to know how and when and where and by whom the man suddenly received his sight. So they led the man who had been blind but who now sees, they led him to the Pharisees. And the Pharisees also wanted to know the how and the when and the where and the whom. So everyone in the story has their focus on the wrong thing, I'm going to say. And our attention also gets diverted here. We get so wrapped up in the Pharisees' response to Jesus, which means that everyone around this man, the neighbors, the Pharisees, and we, the readers, we all have our focus on the wrong thing. We are more interested in the means of the cure instead of the result of the cure. Maybe you'll spend a little bit of time today with the story. I hope that you will. And if you do, you're going to notice that there is an emphasis throughout the whole text on the man's blindness. He is the blind man. He is the man born blind. He's the man blind from birth. That's how he's referred to throughout the whole passage. But as he told his neighbors, and as he told the Pharisees, and as he tells us, the readers, quite frankly, the man they called Jesus put mud on my eyes, and I washed my eyes, and now I see. Now I see. I am no longer the blind man. I am the man who sees. I think it's genius of John's Gospel that the author tells his stories from the perspectives of those people who just don't quite grasp the saving transformation that Jesus offers to us through God. And sometimes we don't grasp that change. If we, like the characters in the narrative, get caught up in the details, in the how and the when and the where and the whom, then we miss out on everything that they miss out on. We all miss out on the glory of God. So, I've been wondering all week long, as I have read this passage again and again, as I have read how the oblivious neighbors, I want to call them the unconscious neighbors, led this man, how they led this man, they keep assuming can't see how they led him where they wanted him to go. And I'm wondering if we can see the place where we want people to go. And if we can't see, then how can we as blind guides expect to lead our neighbors? So like I said to begin with, I have a question for you this morning. And I have a question for you, and this is it. How good is your vision? Are you wearing a blindfold while you tell the world to trust you to show the way? Are we oblivious and unconscious like the neighbors of God's glory around us? Or can you see? I mean, like really see? Are you conscious? Are your spiritual eyes wide open? Can you look beyond all the details of the cure and see the result of the cure, which is a clear vision of the transformative glory of God through Christ? Can you see that? Can you see that? How good is your